Hi, I'm Mrs. McManamy, the assistant principal here at Burris, and I'm going to read to you some from our Dogtown book. I'm going to be reading chapters 105 through 114. I woke to the train whistle. It took me a minute to figure out where I was. The soft bed reminded me of Jessie's bed on Sycamore Avenue. I had a hard time convincing myself to get up. When I finally did, Mouse and I got to work. We went behind the counter and began nosing around. Dogtown had cards that gave humans directions to the shelter. Would a furniture store have this? There were no cards, but we found a pouch of brochures. Mouse pulled one out and unfolded it. On the back was a map. The three of us looked it over. Dogtown wasn't on the map, but the river and our railroad station were, so we had our bearings. Getting home was a straight shot. This was good news, so why did my stomach hurt? Maybe I was hungry, or maybe it was something else. I wanted to get green eggs and ham back to Quinn, but the thought of returning to Dogtown was making me sad. I found myself thinking of telephone poles. Would there be telephone poles I hadn't yet checked on our way home? Chapter 106, A Heart is a Nuisance. Luckily, Mouse had thought to wedge the spool of packing string between the door and the door jamb. Getting the door open was not necessarily as difficult. It was bitter cold when we got out, and the ground was dusted with snow. Metalhead and I took towards carrying green eggs and ham. We were careful when we passed the book between us. We did not want it to get snowy or wet. I saw plenty of posters along the way. Sorry, my pages are stuck together. None of them had a picture of me, but they kept me going. Every time I got tired, I'd see another one up ahead. We were walking together, me hopping, Mouse running, Metalhead clanking next to me. Then I'd see a telephone pole with a sign stapled to it, and I'd hop ahead. I have a question for you, Metalhead said when he caught up with me. Why are you going back? I have to take the book to Quinn, I said, my paws crunching on an ice patch. I can do that, Metalhead said. I have to get dinner for Mouse, I said. We can find another flesh and blood to provide sustenance for Mouse, Metalhead said. We walked on, watching the gusts of wind blow the new snow off the tree limbs. A car rattled behind us. A snowblower started up. Mouse and I have been discussing this, Metalhead said. We wonder why you don't go home. Your humans could have called Dogtown looking for you, you know. They didn't, I whispered, looking back at the tracks we were making in the snow. What if they did and management said you weren't there? Why would management say that, I asked. Because your humans weren't searching for a three-legged dog, Chance, and that's how management describes you. I stopped and stared at him. Besides, sabbaticals aren't just 6 months in length. Sometimes they're 9 months or a year. I swallowed hard. How had I known the sabbatical was 6 months? Did the Bessers tell me that? They must have. For a mind made of metal, you sure have a vivid imagination, I said. The snow started falling. Metalhead shook it off. I'll take that as a compliment, Chance, he said. I guess it is, I said, and I'll tell you something else. It isn't just empty space in there, I nosed at his chest. You have a heart. A heart is what Jimmy's mom would call a nuisance, Metalhead declared. Tell me about it, I said. But I don't want to trade mine in. Me either. I shook the snow off my whiskers. Though right then my heart was worn out from all of the hoping, and I wasn't sure I could hope anymore. Chapter 107. Everybody hated mice. We were within sight of the driveway to Dogtown, and the snow was starting to fall hard. Mouse had climbed on my back. He was shaking, and his little feet were wet. Metalhead was worried that the snow on his coat would melt and ruin his circuitry. We couldn't stay outside much longer, but we weren't sure how to get back in. Dogs didn't chase to go to Dogtown. Animal control brought them in, or humans who found them on the street, or didn't want them, or couldn't handle them anymore. You go in first, I told Metalhead. Then Mouse can sneak in on your heels. Mouse gestured wildly at me. Do you have a better plan, I asked. He shook his head, his whiskers sagging. I'll be right behind you, Mouse. They won't notice you, because they'll be busy looking at Metalhead and me, and if they spot you, I'll run interference, I told him. Mouse was trembling all over. Management hated mice. Everybody hated mice. We waited for a few minutes until a volunteer drove up and got out of her car. The volunteer pulled her muffler over her chin as she loped up the path. When she got the door open, Metalhead jumped out from behind the tree and dove in. Then a tiny blur of brown fur sped past him. The volunteer jumped. Front desk's head popped up behind the counter. What in the name of? The volunteer said, her eyes on Metalhead trotting by the desk with green eggs and ham. Chapter 108, Humans Underestimate Dogs. The Dogtown we walked back into was different than the Dogtown we'd walked out of. You wouldn't think a dog shelter could change that much in one day, but the turnover can be dramatic. Sometimes an entire church group sweeps in and adopts 20 dogs. Other times, animal control brings in 30 dogs in one day. When you're at Dogtown day in and day out, you don't notice the changes as much as you do when you've been away. It started with green eggs and ham. When front desk saw Metalhead carrying that book, she went wackadoodle. They hadn't been able to find green eggs and ham anywhere. It seemed impossible that Metalhead had found it. Of course, he hadn't found it because our copy had been eaten. Where did he find it? Management kept asking. How did he know how important that book was? Seriously, there wasn't a dog in Dogtown who hadn't seen how important green eggs and ham was to Quinn. Humans underestimate dogs. They think when they say, sit, lie down, roll over, and we don't comply, it's because we don't understand. If humans went around telling other humans to sit, lie down, and roll over, do you think they'd do it? Never. Chapter 109, Walk of Shame. Management took photos of Metalhead with green eggs and ham and put them on the Dogtown website. They got Metalhead a brand new Reading Buddy sweater and gave him a permanent pen on Reading Buddy Row. In all the fuss about Metalhead, they ignored me, which was fine. I don't begrudge Metalhead the attention. There was no way I could explain that it had been Mouse who had found the book. I was just trying to adjust to the idea that Dogtown was my forever home when I felt the snap of a leash on my collar. I'll tell you one thing, Chance, you're never going to run away again, management said, her face grumpy and wrinkled as a bloodhound's. She marched me down the walk of shame to the basement. So that's how it was. Metalhead was a genius, and I was a bad dog. Chapter 110, Old Tricks. That night, I was so hungry I had a hard time leaving kibble for Mouse, but I knew his brothers and sisters would be hungry too. So I set aside 7 kibbles, then I licked my bowl, and I licked it again, then a third time because, why not? In some ways, I was happy to be back. I'd complained about the basement being cold, but compared to the snow outside, it really wasn't bad. Anywho, placement in the basement was temporary. There were consequences to running away, but they wouldn't last long. I was management's lucky dog. She needed me. That night, up high in the rafters, in the dim light of the one bulb up there, I saw the shadow of Mouse acting out our journey for his sisters and brothers. He performed the whole thing, culminating with the moment he stole the shrimp. When he was done, all his siblings clapped their little hands, and I yipped my appreciation. I was grateful for my friends at Dogtown, but I couldn't stop thinking about what Metalhead had said. Was it possible Professor Besser's sabbatical wasn't 6 months? Was it possible it had lasted for 1 year? Mouse was more worried I'd been sent to the basement than I was. After he finished his performance, he brought out the deck of cards and put the 5 of hearts in my chain link fence. He was sure that would get me out of there. It had worked so well before, but in the morning, management took out the card and locked the deck up. It was an old trick, and it didn't work anymore. I would have to wait until Wednesday. I would have to wait until the Wednesday night poker game rolled around. Then I'd be management's lucky dog, and I'd get the run of the place again. Chapter 111, A Place in His Heart. When a metal dog misbehaves, they blame the manufacturer. When a real dog misbehaves, they blame the dog. Even so, Metalhead hadn't chosen to be the genius. It was the management who'd made that call. Was it possible that metal dogs couldn't help who they were any more than we could? I no longer believed Metalhead was a hopeless boohoo either. Now I thought he was a courageous dog who had returned to Jimmy's house to find out what had happened. It had been a painful journey, but when it was over, there was a place in that dog's heart for Quinn that hadn't been there before. Waiting. Chapter 112, Waiting. The hours moved slowly in the basement. The hardest part of living down there was being separated from Metalhead. He'd earned himself a space on Reading Buddy Row, and because Metalhead was up there and I was in the basement, I would not get to see Quinn either. But Reading Buddy Day came and went. No Quinn. When Wednesday finally rolled around, I was pretty excited. This would be my last afternoon in the basement. After dinner, I waited by my gate for management to arrive. Chapter 113, Bear. Management never came. I soon found out why. When I was gone, Bear, the Jack Russell, had taken my spot under the poker table. Management had won big that night, so Bear was the dog who got to go to poker night. He was the lucky dog, not me. Chapter 114, Bootlicker. Bear was a bootlicker. A lot of us were bootlickers, but he did have to be a great reading buddy But did he have to be a great reading buddy and a lucky poker dog too? Even though Bear had the run of the place, he stayed close to management. He followed her wherever she went, and if he spotted anything out of order, he would yip in management's face until management saw it too. Management really liked that, I could tell. So Bear was off the books, and I was on them. My luck had finally run out. Great. Thank you so much for allowing me to read to you. I had a great time, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.